In this video, we're going to talk about how to adopt an exit strategy mindset. The simple fact, as we know, is that you build businesses differently if you're planning an exit right from the beginning. So let's talk about how we do that and start to structure not just your business, but your mind for success. We're going to talk about what do we actually mean when we use the word sell our business. We'll talk about how to get the right mindset, and then we'll further explore what's good for running a business is also good for selling it. Okay, what do we mean by sell? I want to redefine what exit can mean for you. And most people, when they think about selling their business, they think about something I call their idealized exit, which means they build up a business for a number of years. It gets very profitable. They sell it for 100% cash. They work for 60 days and then they go sit on a beach. And the reality is that rarely ever happens. And even if it does, there's actually an argument to be made that that was the wrong buyer, because if you're selling for 100% cash up front, the odds are almost certain that that buyer is giving you a lower offer than what you could have achieved. The next part is what I call a traditional exit. It's like an idealized exit, but it's more typical to what a lot of people will talk about in the industry, where you build up the business, you sell it for some combination of cash, stabilization payments, which basically means if the business stays stable, you'll get a little bit more money, and then something called an earnout, which if you're not familiar with, we can explain in more detail later, but essentially rewards you for the better the business does after the buyer purchases it. That's called a traditional exit. But what you might not be aware of is there's actually a lot more different types of exits that could be appropriate for your situation. There's something called a majority exit, where in essence, you still sell the business and you sell it for cash, but you only sell maybe 75 or 85% of it, and you elect to keep 15 or 20 or 25% in something called rolled equity or retained equity going forward in the new company. The easiest way to think about that is if you decided to sell 75% of it today and 25% of it later, you get the cash for the 75%, and then 2 or 3 years down the road, according to some set provisions, you cash out the other 25% in what's referred to as a second exit. This can be an outstanding strategy for businesses that are growing if you find the right buyer partner. You may also find that there's what we call a joint venture or a majority partnership transaction. This is oftentimes referred to as a 51-49. In essence, you're deciding to sell half of the business today and keep half of it going, and you're deciding to stay on and run the business even though you gave up majority control. Now, remember, I'm not picking what is the best option at this point. That has to be analyzed. But here's the point, is that if you're not considering all of these different types of exits, you don't even know that they might exist for you. The last one is what we refer to as a minority exit. In this instance, you may only be selling 20 or 30% of the business to get what we call some chips off the table, but you're still in control of the company and you continue to drive the company forward, and likely you've left some of the money that you received on the valuation inside the business to grow it more aggressively. So, the important point to understand is when we talk about selling a business, there's a whole wide range of options that you should be considering before deciding which exit is right for you. Now, I recognize that some people may be out there thinking, you know what, I really don't want to sell the business. I love what I'm doing, and I'd like to continue to run it for many, many more years. And in that instance, I still believe that you should have an exit strategy mindset, and I call it, if you're not selling to someone else, then you better be selling to yourself. And here's what I mean. The first thing that you do in the sell to self model is you make sure that you have adequate working capital in the business, okay, which means that would be debt financing to grow the company and manage what is, an ever increasing and growing business. And that means more inventory. It might mean more staff. Here's the key point. You secure that debt or equity without any personal guarantees, but only guaranteed by the company. The second thing that you do then is, now that there's cash in the business to grow it, you dedicate a certain amount of the cash flow of the business to be taken out by you. Most people, in essence, are being their own banker by constantly reinvesting their own money in their businesses. And if you truly want to hold on to your business, but want to de-risk it and get some of the money into your Me account, take these 2 steps. And then finally, you can also consider, once you've done that for a little bit, selling what's called a minority share, where you put a little bit of money into the business, and then that allows you to take distributions out of it. So for example, you may take in $1 million for 20% of the business, and then that $1 million is used to grow. And then the person that invested the 20% in the business, they get 20% of the distributions that are declared, and you get the other 80%. So remember that even if you're not selling to a third party, everybody at some point is exiting their business, and you should think about it strategically. That's having what I call an exit strategy mindset. Okay, the other great thing about having an exit strategy mindset is it really starts to motivate yourself. Here's some of the motivations that I've seen from exiting multiple businesses myself, and also helping dozens and dozens and dozens of people exit their businesses. The first thing is that there is a number of not only financial impacts, but lifestyle impacts. Number one, I come from a family where nobody thought about exiting businesses. So if you actually achieve that particular goal, there is a sense of, wow, I've made it to the next level of my own personal success along my journey. The second thing is, once you've exited a business and you reinvest in the next business, you probably have more financial means, so you can control and have more power over your ideas. Third, your brand as a person, when you've exited, will increase. That was one of the most surprising things that happened to me when I exited my first business, is that literally people came out of the woodwork to want to invest in my next businesses, and I got access to more successful people, so that on the next business, I didn't even need to use my own money to start it. I was able to secure a partner right from the beginning. And then finally, each time you exit a business, you're gaining yourself closer to your financial freedom, and now you can start to set the rules of the game. So if you think about that, all of those reasons are why you should strongly consider exiting as a part of your goals. Also, when you start exit strategy planning, it shifts your focus. Let's walk through how. Most of the people, if I go around to different conferences, they tend to know right away their top line revenue. And usually they know it in the last 30 days. Yep, I did about $200,000 of revenue in the last month. But if I ask many of them to tell me, how much did you do not only in profit, but in after-tax profits in the last time period, most people don't have an understanding of that number right off the tip of their tongue. And if they're not focused on it, they're probably not focused on improving it. Having an exit strategy as part of your plan will shift your thinking from top line to bottom line. However, it will also shift your time horizon from the last month to the lifetime running your business, including the selling of it. And what I mean by that is most people will say, oh yeah, in the last year, I did $2 million worth of revenue. Well, if I ask them the question, in the next year, how much after-tax profit do you plan on doing? Most of them will go, oh, I don't really know that. That's a key sign that they're not focused on an exit, but rather just focused on running the business. And then finally, having an exit strategy mindset means you should start to shift your mindset, not only from when you're running the business, to also all of the payments that you might get in the form of earnouts, stabilization payments, or even rolled equity after you sell the business. So now you're starting to plan through what I call the true lifetime of the business, which is the lifetime that the business is making you money, even if you don't own it. Because frankly, if you sell your business next year, but you get earnouts over the next 2 or 3 years, you want to be setting your business to be successful all the way 2025 so that you can make sure that you maximize the value that you receive. So let's really now dive in to the topic of what's good for selling a business is also good for running a business. Because oftentimes people will say, well, if I never exit, wasn't all this exit planning just a big waste of time? And the answer is no. Here's why. When you think about exiting a business, you're going to make better decisions. The best example I can give you is fully understanding that a business is valued on its profitability, not just on increasing revenue. Far too often, people run very, very stressful lives because they're running a business. They're not realizing that it's not very profitable and they're only making 5 or 10% margin. So they're churning out a lot of what I call hollow calories in order to run that particular business. The second thing is you'll start to focus on things like defensibility and excellence, because these are going to be questions that a buyer is going to ask you. They're going to ask you things like, are you susceptible to low-cost competitors? Or does your supplier relationships allow you to be one of the low-cost competitors? Does your product naturally generate great reviews without you having to, quote unquote, boost them, which can be obviously a major warning sign for a buyer? And finally, on this aspect, selling is simpler. The easier that your business is the more easy that it's going to be to exit it. So focusing, whether it be systems, strategies, operations, everything that you can do to make a business simple will make it easier for a buyer to understand, which makes them willing to pay more money for it. Okay, so now let's talk about a couple of other key aspects to understand about what's good for selling a business is good for running it. Now take a look at this list. Okay, the first thing is selling a business will force you to understand your numbers. The exit process is going to demand it. And if you know more about the numbers of your business, which many of us shy away from because it's either boring or it's complicated, you're going to know a lot more about what you should do to successfully run it. You're also going to understand what would you need to do in order to capitalize it and scale it to reach your exit strategy number. Many people don't recognize that at the pace that they're going, they might have to run their business for 15 years in order to meet their life goal. Better to understand that now and start re-engineering the systems in your business to be able to get it to a size that match your owner needs. And then another critical part is understanding that when you start thinking from the lens of a buyer, you'll start thinking about how do you reduce risk for that particular buyer. And by reducing risk for the buyer, you're also reducing risk for yourself in selling it. The last topic I'd like to talk about in terms of transferability of your business is understanding that there's not just easy running a business, but there's also an easy handoff to your business. Think of that as like the baton in the relay race. You want to get all of your systems documented, your SOPs in place, those types of things, so that a buyer can come in and easily take over your business. If not for the main reason is that you want them to not screw up the business so that you can hit your earnouts and your stabilization payments and your rolled equity. So thinking from that ability makes it more transferable, which also makes the systems more easy for new employees or other people that might come into the business in order to run it. The last part of good for selling a business is good for running of it isn't what it gives you, but it's the questions you'll start asking yourself as a business owner. The simple way to put it is that you'll start asking more strategic questions if you're thinking about exiting, such as, does this business really have real upside? Or was this just the first business I got into because I took a course on how to get into Amazon and they said start with something small and light? It'll also start to have you ask questions about what am I really going to need in order to grow this to be a $10 million business? And if I don't have that kind of capital myself, I better start thinking about what are some debt or equity capital partners that I can bring in to help me scale the company. And it'll also start you thinking along the lines of what's going to make my business most valuable to a buyer? For example, if I have one brand that has great products in it, and all a buyer needs to do is to add more color and size variations to the product portfolio, that might make it really easy for a buyer to say, hey, if I insert more cash, it's going to do more business on the same products. However, if I only have one product and then I got to go switch to another brand because I define my brand too narrowly, a buyer might perceive that as not as valuable because they have more legwork to do. Okay, some final thoughts about adopting the right exit strategy mindset. First, You now know that more than half the money you're ever going to put in your pocket is likely going to come when you exit. If that's not motivation enough, I don't know what it is. But you're also going to know now how many products it's going to take in order to reach your overall exit goal. You now have the motivation of understanding that running a business and exiting a business in many ways are one and the same thing in terms of alignment toward goals. And we're starting to channel your overall top level number that you want to achieve into a how-to plan for the business in order to get there. The final thought I can give you is that you gotta stop thinking of an exit strategy as something extra in your business that you have to do, and rather start thinking of it as something that's an integral part of what you should be doing right now. Hopefully, this video has armed you with the motivation and the energy and the excitement to think about an exit in your business. And it's like Lorianne Munzer once said, in order to do something, you have to see it, you have to believe it, and then you can achieve it. Thank you for watching this video, and I want you to now start thinking of exit strategy as integral to your business, and you've overcome one of the biggest obstacles in exiting, which is your own mindset.